Hi, welcome back to Spirit Lounge. Hope you guys are doing well. Firstly, apologise for the 10 minutes loss of sound on the last video. I'm having problems with my microphone, which I'm sending back, so this is working through my laptop microphone and not this one either. So some configuration issues there, but my other one's broken. So I hope you can hear me okay. It may sound a little tinny and echoey because it's going through the microphone on the laptop, so apologies for that first and foremost. So let's just jump straight into today's chapter. So this one is, it was media in terms of length and complexity. It's a Valentinian exposition with Valentinian liturgical readings. So it's got a prayer at the end, in other words, and it concentrates on most of the text is lost. First of all, there's a lot of gaps in it. Pulled out what would make sense to us, or text that if you pulled it out made some sense. It's sort of a mythical narrative, a Valentinian mythical narrative, and it's in the style of those teachings. And just so we know what Valentinian is, or Valentinianism is, it's Valentinus was a person who was born in circa 200, not 2000 AD, an Egyptian religious philosopher, and he founded the Alexandrian schools of Gnosticism, in other words, where these Nag Hammadi texts no doubt probably had some input and origination. They talk about the good and evil, which is talking about dualism, and the salvation through Gnosis, which is the acquisition of knowledge, or esoteric knowledge in this case. Excuse me. So it does talk about primal. It does talk about these pairs in 360, going up to 360 eons. It's quite interesting because that does 360 were the original days of the year, and then we moved to 365, I believe. So it talks about primal pair. The first one being depth, which is the depth of the divine realm, the pleroma. The silence being the source is set in silence in complete contentment and tranquility, and then it duplicates out, doubles itself, all the way up to 360. It's quite broken up, so you can't really understand it too well. But this is just wanted to let you know what this is because it's mentioned a couple of times in this chapter. So let's just get straight into this. Okay, the root of the all. The Father, let me just make sure this is on the screen correctly. Yep, okay. I'm also watching my microphone this time, make sure it doesn't cut off. The root of the all. The Father who is the root of the all. Ineffable one. As oneness, alone in silence. Silence means tranquility. Nothing existed before him. He also exists as a two-ness. So this is the depth and the silence. His partner is silence. So the source is the depth of the infiniteness, the eternal, unending oneness and unified, incorruptible, unknowable depth of the all. And then it sits in silence, which is tranquility and peace. He possessed the all dwelling inside him together with will being, love and permanence. These are unborn, so these are aspects of the divine, or archetypes of the divine. Free will, sense, just being of self. Love of expression, and permanence mean we don't die. We are existing permanently within our spiritual selves. All dwelling inside of him, absolutely. Everything exists as possibility within the thought and expression of the divine one. So that makes sense. The generation of the sun. Excuse me a moment. Okay, the generation of the sun. God came forth, the sun, mind, and the all. So that when he talks about the sun, he's talking about Christ as well. But I would say that we are all expressions of source. We are sons, daughters, although we are expressing gender within our physical forms, but we don't have it in our spiritual source form. So we are all expressions of the same thing. We are Christ energy within ourselves, yet for us to reveal it to ourselves first. mind of the all. His thought takes its existence from the root of the all. I like this one because from my perception, everything is an expression or manifested itself initially from a thought. The thought of the divine expressed itself out, and through the forces of the universe creates form within this universe, but also is used by those beings in the universe to create form and matter themselves by using universal law and the forces that are expressed through the thought of the divine to manifest the possibility of universal universes. His thought takes its existence from the root of the all. For the sake of the all, he entertained a thought of something other than himself. So this is talking about what I've just referenced. He entertained the thought of something other than himself. The divine thought to manifest. Remember, it's manifest through Barbello, the Barbello aeon, which is the virgin of expression form of the universe, as per Gnostic thought. But effectively, it's saying the same thing, that all that exists was an expression of initial intention, which expressed itself in a thought, or vice versa, chicken and egg, both at the same time. Moment, if you like, expressing the intent to manifest what would ultimately become what we call the universe, the realm of possibility, the realm of expression, the realm of form, and the material side of things. For nothing else was in existence before him. He was the one who moved out of that place. So that means he expressed all that is out of the place of depth and silence from which the divine is at rest. Spreading out, oneness before whom there is no one, he is also two-ness. Again, we mentioned depth and silence. Dwelling in silence and speaking only with himself. He kept himself in four. So this is the depth in silence, which then doubled and made four. So this is where the pentad, or the as we discussed here, the tetrad, which is the four, pentad is five, sorry, comes into existence and then multiplies itself onward, while also dwelling in 360. So it just extends what it's saying, that the divine is using these symbolic ways of expressing what is effectively saying the divine expressed itself out into what exists. And they call it 360 edge of pleroma. What that means is it's expressing itself out into the edge of what it's manifested. But as we know, what is manifesting is constantly shifting and expanding outward, because there is no end to the infinite, because the infinite has no end. He brought himself forth. In two he revealed his will, in the four he spread himself out. So again, this is talking about the multiplication and the multiplying of 2, 4, 8, 16 and so on and so forth, 360. The Son as the revealer, the Father for the Father's thought and will. Move on to his revelation. So we reveal the divine doesn't wish to reveal its push its revelation onto us. It is our job to reveal the reality of Source and our Godhead to ourselves. So we are supposed to go towards the revealing of the Source within us, i.e. moving towards it. So the divine does not come to us, we have to go to it. That is the revelation or the revealing of that knowledge to ourselves. Coming here below and all the rest. This is the Son, Father of the all. The mind of the Spirit. He is spring being the revelation from the silence and a mind of the all. So this is talking about Christ as the revelation and the spring of knowledge to others. Producer of the all and actualization of the thought of the Father. So this is the actualization, is the revealing. It could be called the autogenes level of ascent, which is the desire and the descent down below. When the first Father willed it, he revealed himself in him, that is Christ, that the revelation of the all takes place. I call him will of all, will of the all. He conceived this kind of thought. See, the God of truth is to give glory to the root of the all. So we are from the root. The root is the all, and to receive this kind of thought, which means the spirit, the thought, the breath, the intention of the source, which is the spirit itself. The spirit is the breath within us. The divine breath of the divine source is our spirit, our spiritual essence, which enters this vessel, or rather the vessel is within the spirit, because the spirit is all encompassing. It's an energy around, within and around, from without and within and without, and the body exists within the force of our spirit. And once the spirit leaves, the body ceases to animate and then obviously dies. Okay, so only the Son can go inside the boundary. They saw him residing in oneness, in two-ness, and in four, bringing forth the only one and the boundary, the confirmation and actualization of the all, the veil of silence. He is the true high priest, the one who has the authority to enter the holies of holies. Glory to the eons, and bringing forth abundant wealth to fragrance, treasure of the all, elevated above the all. So this is either talking about Christ or the divine force within us. You can take this particular start at the beginning of this passage to be this, but it's effectively talking about the actualization of the all, which is the Gnosis, and the delivery of knowledge to ourselves through that journey that we go on to. The veil of silence. Now this could be the silence of the spirit within that we're not hearing, but it also could be this journey of tranquility and silence that we are on once we embark upon that spiritual ascension that we're all seeking. The true high priest is the Christ energy, who has the authority to enter the holies of the holies, and the abundant wealth to fragrance. That what that effectively means is the abundant wealth is the joy and revealing that we feel. The fragrance is the gnosis and the knowing of the divine itself, the smell of a scent, the smell of divine force and light. And the abundant wealth is our gnosis into that. Treasure of the all, of course, is self-explanatory. Concerning the boundary, so the boundary is talking about the pleroma, in other words, it's talking about the edges of existence, or the edges of the expression of the infinite, which is what we call the multiverse or the universe. As I believe that there is no edge, because there cannot be an edge to an infinite. So for me, the divine is all expressive. We can never know it's unknowable, the enormity of the expression of the manifestation that exists, because it's so immense and infinite. It doesn't have an edge, but this indicates a boundary. Now this could be a boundary between the physical and the spiritual and the divine. It could be the boundary of the pleroma or the expressionable universe. It could be many things. Concerning the boundary, it has four powers. So I think what it's talking about, the boundary is the divine boundary. It has four powers: a separating one, a strengthening one, a form-giving one, and a producing one are the true powers. If we are going to understand their aspects in aspects time span, for they maintain that the boundary has only two powers, so it's very broken. A separating one and a strengthening one. So he's saying the main two powers here are the separating and strengthening, insofar as it separates the depth from the eons. So he's talking about the depth being the divine realm, and the eons being the psychical realm in between, and obviously material realm below. We talk about the left and the right, if you remember, from previous chapters. So I have a cough still. It happens when I just speak. It's quite strange. Exposition about the fullness. Greater assurance in the scriptures and formulate ideas. The ancients say that they were proclaimed by God. Let us try to understand. So this is broken up passage at the beginning. So it's talking about greater assurance in the scriptures and formulate ideas. The ancients say that they were proclaimed by God. So this is probably indicating that the scriptures the ancient priests were proclaiming that these were delivered by God to them, which probably isn't the case. Let's just try to understand his inscrutable richness. The first four, in fact, produce another four, which is that of the Word and life. So remember the first four, the depth and silence, and it just keeps multiplying. This is what this is talking about, the multiplication of into 360, which is the pleroma itself, but also indicates the year, the days in the year. Let us try to understand. Okay, we'll read that bit, sorry about that. So, which is that of the Word and life, man and church, road for the glory of the ineffable life, glory of silence. So this is quite broken up, so apologies for this, but you can gather what he's trying to say here. Man for his own glory and life for the glory of truth. So let's just read that again. The first four is in fact another four, which is that of the Word and life. So in other words, it's expanding consciousness into this extending pleroma, which is multiplying itself out into these grades, if you like, or these numbers moving into 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and so forth, which is then expanding the Word. The Word is the Word of the divine, and life, man and church. This is talking about humanity. The church, I believe, is the internal church, not the physical church that we build. It's the road for the glory of the ineffable life, glory, and of silence. This is talking about moving into that spiritual place, and the road and the journey, the path of spiritual expansion. Man for his own glory and life for the glory of truth. The four that has been brought forth after his likeness. However, the 10, so this is where it gets confusing. However, the 10 from word and life brought forth tens. This is just talking about the multiplication again. I didn't want to actually add this in here because it's very confusing. A lot of the passages are missing, and you don't quite understand where all these multiplications and what they're supposed to mean. So I put this in here anyway, but this is what it's basically talking about, and why I added this is because that 3360 came into being, fullness of the year and the year of the Lord. So you can see that it's moving into the days of the year. Back then it was 360. I think it was subsequently changed to 365. I think the original year was 360, and then obviously it maps to astrological movements of planets as well. So they mapped the movements of planets which formed our calendar year, which formed time for us, is the astrology, the movements of the heavens back in those days, was how time and the days of the year were actually formulated. But this is mapping to that. The reaction of the fullness. He made remembrance together with the fullness by means of the word, after Christ entered into it, just as I said before, the uncontainable word, uncontainable one. Very short, but effectively saying the remembrance of the fullness is reminding ourselves of God by the means of the word, which is the messages that the divine is bringing to us through avatars such as Christ, which entered into the human realm but brought that word with him, and the uncontainable one is obviously the divine itself. Okay, how the error must be corrected. He who had gone up into fullness did not want to consent to the suffering, but he was prevented from passing through because he was held back by the boundary. So, we talked about this before. The boundary is the physical. Is the pleroma is that the universe itself, and the divine. Remember, everything is in the divine. There's no separation, but for our minds to understand, we can say there's a boundary. This is talking about us being bound to this material realm and not passing through the boundary, which is the material realm, into the divine realm, which is a spiritual energetic movement, not a physical one. Remember, it's vibration and frequencies, those levels of ascent that the previous chapters were discussing. That's what we pass through. They all are coalesced together. There is no separation there. We just pass through those, like a buoy being lifted by water as more water is added. This is our slow passage, a tranquil passage, a silent passage, which is what this is discussing. And we're trying to get through the boundary, but we're held into it, held back by the boundary because we need to ascend further and further to the frequency of our divine origin. For the correction could not come about except by means of his Father. This is the divine. So by means of moving to the ascent of the divine. Father's own Son, who belongs the entire divine, come about except of his Father's own Son, who belongs the entire divine fullness. Lots of complexity there in a little confusing sentence. It pleased him to place with him the powers as his body, and he descended. So effectively it's talking about Christ brought the word of the divine with him as he descended down into beyond the boundary through Sophia into the depths of, in this instance, the incarnated life, the incarnated world, the realm of the demiurge as the Gnostics describe it, bringing the fullness with him. The repentance of Sophia. So remember, Sophia was an eon, which I believe are archetypes that don't really exist. I don't believe, but they are archetypes or eons, expressions of divine that we create. We create the archetype Sophia, the concept of Sophia. But the Christ drops through Sophia. Remember, Sophia is in the 8th realm. There are 7. They are the archontic realms, the seventh heavens, and then because the demiurge is the 8th, and the Sophia is the 9th realm. Now these things Sophia endured after her Son had hastened up from her. My reasoning ability is gone, so she's talking about herself, but insight has remained. Then she wept, saying to herself, "Look at me." So this is where she manifested a demiurge, thought she could imitate the divine through manifesting something, but she didn't understand, or rather the Sophia concept archetype didn't understand what she was doing. So therefore, this corruption was developed called a demiurge. Then she didn't do it with her partner. Her partner is the divine. She was doing it in isolation. He talks a lot about the partner. The partner is our divine connection with Source itself. Sophia left that partner and created by herself. Therefore, this aberration was manifest, which is a demiurge. Then she wept, saying to herself, "Look at me, those insights that I pondered, but the memory of them has remained." She repented and prayed to the Father of truth, saying, "Granted that I have abandoned my partner." This is the connection with the divine, because she tried to manifest without instruction or partnership with the divine force. "Because of that, I am outside the region of stability as fourth eons and producing fruit with my partner." So this is talking about the Sophia was told to oversee or be above the demiurge, looking down upon what she'd created until it all elevated back to the all, and therefore Sophia would be re-entered and absorbed into the divine space. And this another passage in here does describe that. She realized what she used to be. So she realized that she dropped away from the divine, doing what she had done. What had become of her? She laughs because she continued to be solitary and imitated the incomprehensible one. It is said that she weeps because she had cut herself off from her partner. That's right, she wept because she'd realized what she'd tried to imitate the divine by being isolated and thinking that she could create something in a delusional way, thinking that she was doing it in homage to the divine, but in fact creating error as a result. Okay, the creation of the world. Since the seeds of Sophia were unfinished, so this is talking about the demiurge and then the archontics, it's also unfinished because it didn't have, at that point, the breath of the divine in it, i.e. it was aware of itself. Remember that these things were aware of itself, but didn't have the divine breath within them. Without form, Jesus conceived a creation of this kind. He created it from the seeds, with Sophia working together with him. He came down to reveal to them the fullness. In other words, the form that was manifest was in the depths, looking up into the light of the waters above, mirroring that in the creation below, as above so below. And Christ was coming down to reveal to them what they had forgotten, or rather what they were, the sleep that was imposed upon them, so that they wouldn't remember who they were, because at that point they were given the divine spirit was in them, but it was suppressed and the light was dimmed so far down that they weren't, that which was alive or existing in that depth was not aware of the fullness in which they belong. Instructed them about the place of the uncreated. All things he made after the fullness and the Father, uncontainable one, uncreated act of bringing into being, for it is from the uncreated that the Father brings forth into form. That's true. So everything is from ultimately in the all. All error, or non-error as we wish to call it, is within the all, because the all is all possibility. It allows the universe to be what it will, and it allows that life within it to become what it will within that universe, within the realm of possibility, form, matter, creation, using the forces of the divine universe to manifest what exists. In other words, we create what exists in this universe. There are beings creating and forming matter all the time, using the force of the universe and the knowledge of energy and frequency and how it's created and how it can be manipulated. We create duality through our actions, words, thoughts and intentions. Everything has a platform of love. It's up to us to determine whether or not we keep it that way or we do not. Okay, creation is the shadow. So what he's talking about here is creation is the shadow of the pre-existent, which is this sentence over here. It is true, this is talking about the manifestation of matter, and creation being the demiurge realm is a shadow of the divine itself. It's just a reflection of it, or it pertains to be imitating it, but is a shadow of it. Jesus then fashioned the creation and performed his work. He separated them from one another, and the better passions he put out in the spirit. I spell that wrong. Bad ones into carnal beings. Providence had provided the correction in order to put forth shadows and images of the pre-existent, the present, and the future beings. That was the economy that was the economy that was entrusted to Jesus. What is he saying? In other words, he's saying that the demiurge, Jesus came down to perform his work, fashioned the creation, which means molded it, reminded it of its divine self, and performed his work. He separated them from one another, and the better passions he put into spirit. So he put those who were seeking to move away from the carnal ones. The bad ones remained attached to the carnal material aspects of life. On the angels, Jesus came down. He also brought the seeds of the words of the all. The partner that is the angels. So he had some angels as partners, or angelic beings, or forms, or energy. Her partner had, with the ascent of the fullness, put forth the angels. So I'm not going to talk about her, I'm not talking about Sophia here, because it's very broken up. You can't really tell what this means. This is the will of the Father. No one in the fullness shall be without a partner. I like this passage, this particular sentence, because it's saying we're never alone. As we all know, we can live physically in isolation sometimes, doing work, practicing our spiritual journey, because it is a private one. But we are never alone, ever. We may be physically sitting in a room with four walls, a ceiling and a floor and windows, but we may be physically alone, but we are never spiritually alone. And you only understand that you're not spiritually alone when you're moving towards fullness. You start to become aware that the divine is always with you, that the expressions of the divine, be that spiritual energetic form that sits with you and walks with you through life, you can call upon, but you call upon those once you become aware that they exist, that you are not alone, that you are in a realm of the divine, and love continually is surrounding you. We just need to be aware that it exists and let it enter us, and speak to the divine as if it is across the table from you, sitting there. Speak to the spiritual manifestations, guides and spiritual beings that guide you uniquely in your journey and your path. Ask them to assist. They are all there waiting for you to reconnect with them. Okay, and give fruit. So I'll read that again. No one in the fullness shall be without a partner and give fruit. She should endure suffering, then was she should endure suffering, then was not the will of the Father. She was all by herself without her partner. In other words, she endured suffering by being detached. Wasn't the will of any divine force. She took that choice on her own because she detached away from the guidance or the instruction of the divine through her acts, which is called error. Okay, more on the creation of the world. So this again talks about 2, 4, and so on and so forth. And you write all that down. It's very broken. There came into images, likenesses, angels, archangels, gods. When all these things had taken place through providence, they consist of spiritual beings as well as of carnal ones. So this is talking about the left and the right. So remember the left and the right, or the physical, psychical, and spiritual. This is talking about those two spectrums. So the matter side is the left. So the material, the left is the physical matter side. In the middle, as we move forward within our expansion, we'll go into the psychical side, and the right is the spiritual side, which is the side moving towards away from psychical or mediumship and those practices, but then moving into just divine knowing and moving into the spiritual, more energy focused side, which is where the autogenous aspect exists. Okay, carnal ones left and right, such as are in heaven, and such as are upon the earth. So this is talking about as above, so below. He, the demiurge, so the demiurge, fashioned from them this kind of location. So the demiurge manifested the physical universe. I agree with the narration of the universe created to allow all possibility of the world, not evil. So this is talking about. There's a lot of subtext in this after this particular sentence. The universe isn't an evil act. The creation or the manifestation or the existence of the universe isn't an evil act. It is an expression for us, in my perception. We are expressions, intentions and thought of the divine, just as is the forces that can manipulate themselves through the forces of creation, creation, destruction and transformation, and the other forces of the universe that govern our lives too, manifest everything out there. This is a realm of possibility which is guided by thought. We are thought, we are expressions which enter into this universe to experience all that is possible, all that is, all that can be, all that we are. And it's not an evil realm. This is the economy that determines it here. It's the economy is everything that exists in it determines whether it moves towards a light or it retains its source frequency or it does not. And that's how that occurs from each one of us individually. So we are an instrument. The word is an instrument. So in other words, the divine message is an instrument for us to re-emerge to the breath of grace. But this universe is it's not a school. We're not here. I don't believe we are here for suffering. But we will always enter life into the same frequency and vibration we had in a previous one. And incarnation is heavily spoken about in the Nag Hammadi texts. Okay, so where were we here? It's a kind of school. So it talks about school here. It's a kind of school, but it's not a school. We're not here to learn lessons. We're here to read. We're here to re-emerge ourselves back into the realm or the frequency of the divine grace, which we have clearly lost in life. With instruction, with the form. The creation of the human world. This demiurge now began to fashion a human being after his own image on the one hand, and on the other hand after the likeness of the pre-existent ones. So he fashioned it to himself, and also the image above, in the waters above. It was this kind of dwelling place that Sophia made rise of the seeds So the seeds are the spiritual force. Remember, there's a story. This says that the matter form of life or man was given the breath of spirit within it, so it animated it, and it was that spirit which was rising, which the demiurge, when he was speaking to Adam, didn't recognize Adam, not because he didn't recognize the form, didn't recognize the spirit and the energy which Adam was then expressing, which was something the demiurge didn't understand, because the demiurge hadn't implanted that seed into the body of Adam. At the time, it was the breath of Sophia or Eve that came into Adam, which is the divine spirit, in other words. Okay, the fall and its consequences. God, in this case, is demiurge. So I talk about this a little bit. I don't use the word God very much in my own writings, and I say the word God because it's in the text, but I don't use this word much because humanity and religious doctrine and scripture has degraded this word God, because there are many gods that people worship. There are false beings who pertain to be gods that many worship on this earth. Whether it's a capital G or a lowercase g, it matters not. There is only one all. There is one divine all, and that is all that exists. That's all we need to concern ourselves with. There are no other gods. There are expressions that humanity has created to help it understand the divine, i.e., so the eons are expressions. Hindu deities are expressions. We are not to worship them as the all. There is only one all. And this demiurge is another archetype expression. So this is why I don't use the word God. I just use source, the divine grace, to describe the all, because the word God for me is so corrupted, it's so misled, it's so diluted in its meaning that I don't write it. I don't use it in my writings. I don't like using to describe it, the all, because there are many misinterpretations and misdirected meaning to that word. But in the Nag Hammadi, it's used a lot. Obviously, all the texts, I think, use this word. God, which in this case, in this passage, is the demiurge, and it has a capital G, which is another surprising thing, because I would have thought it should have been a lowercase g, because the demiurge isn't a god. God, the devil, is in fact one of the gods, God beings, one of the God's beings, but he defected and took with him the entire army of angels. So this is saying that the demiurge, or the devil, was a divine being, which then moved away from source itself, took other eons with it, plucked out his root from that place, so he took it himself away from the realm of source, or the depth and silence. He made the human of God fall. This is talking about humanity, I believe. For that reason, sons were born to him who were angry with one another. So this was and other humans through procreative act. Cain killed Abel, his brother. The devil breathed into him his spirit. So devil, for me, there are dark energies that are manifest by us. If we worship something long enough and we feed it, sacrifice, it will exist. The devil itself can manifest in almost everything, but it's, for me, we cannot blame the devil for our actions, words, thoughts and intentions if they are negative and evil acts. They are ours, we own them. We cannot devolve responsibility for things we do by saying, oh, the devil made me do it. So you can be possessed, so you can have dark energies attaching to you, and the culmination of lots of dark forces connecting to you, because your frequency is so low that they come to you and they attach to you, which is what possession is. Can influence your action, words, thoughts and intentions, but ultimately there isn't an opposing aspect being out there called the devil. It's our actions, words, thoughts and our manifestation of dark forces that we create If we're low, if we're depressed, if we're angry, if we are of the frequency that dark energies will attach to, they will come to us, and they will attach to us into a forms where they will overtake our being. That does happen. But I don't like Cain killed Abel. Cain killed Abel because of jealousy, I would have thought, and it was all his own action and volition that did so, because he had that frequency within him. Was fighting and desertion among the angels and among humankind. So what he's saying here is that the realm that started to be created and the life that was in it started to fight among themselves, and there was fighting and desertion and splits between all that existed within it, even from what it calls the angels within the demiurge realm, between those on the right and those on the left. So this is left and right, heaven and earth, spiritual powers and carnal worlds, devil against God, angels lusted after the daughters of the humans, descended into flesh, God made a flood, regretted having created the world. Again, this is not the real God. This is talking about doctrine that I don't agree with, and I'll say this outright, and many of you may agree with this. This is indoctrinated scripture and meaning. The true all that I know doesn't destroy anything, doesn't ask for you to tell it that you love it, doesn't wish you to do acts to prove yourself to it, isn't a jealous or a vengeful being, doesn't punish us, and will never kill and force death upon anything through a flood or otherwise. What this is, these are beings that pertain to be God, because at those times they came from the heavens. This could be non-terrestrial beings as well. We need to open our minds that this is not the all. This God is not the God that I know. And this is why it's interesting in some of this text in the Nag Hammadi, it mentions this quite a lot. This is some other thing pertaining to be God. That's all I will say, and I'll leave it up to you guys to determine this for yourselves. But I will say one thing. The God that the source and divine grace that I will return to, doesn't made a flood to kill off life and regret creating anything. This is a false deity that is being described here. Okay, the restoration. Sophia, the Son, the angels and the seeds. Jesus are the images of the fullness. The demiurge is a shadow of the partner. We mentioned this. The demiurge is a shadow of the light above it, or the light that manifested it through Sophia. Sophia's partner is an image of the Father of truth. Sophia and Jesus are images of truth. When Sophia receives her partner and Jesus receives Christ, then the fullness will receive Sophia in joy. All will be joined, restored. Eons will have received abundance, will have changed. Even if they change, they remain unchanging. This passage is effectively saying, for me, it isn't talking about Sophia and Jesus really. This is, if we reflect that to ourselves, Sophia will return into joy of the fullness. Jesus already received Christ, because Christ is consciousness. It's the message that Jesus brought with him. But Sophia will receive by the partner when everything is joined and restored. That means that every spirit that exists within this manifested universe, whether it's in human form or otherwise, returns and passes through that ring not past, the snake eating its own tail, and returns itself to the frequency of autogenes, removes itself from incarnated life, and returns back into the frequency of source itself, that first level or gradient that the Nag Hammadi describes. So there's the autogenes, protophanes, and calyptos, remember, and then there was the ascents above that. The autogenes is the one where we remove ourselves from this realm, which is called the joining and restoration. So until everything that the life, supposedly the error that was created by Sophia, all elevates beyond and above, until then, Sophia remains within the ninth heaven, and stays there until everything, all life, understands its richness and its beauty. Okay, Valentinian liturgical reading. So this is where the prayer starts. There's three of them. It is fitting for you now to send your Son Jesus Christ to anoint us. We may trample on snakes, ward off the powers of the devil. He is the supreme shepherd, this is Jesus. Through him we have known you, we glorify you. Glory be to you, Father in the eon. Father is the Holy Church, which is the Spirit. The church is here, will always be here. From the beginning, from eternity, boundless, of the eternal realms. Amen. And another passage called On First Baptism. This is the fullness of the summary of knowledge revealed to us. This is good, this is interesting. This is the fullness of the summary of knowledge. That effectively means that we're here. The ascension is basically knowledge. It's the gnosis of understanding the reality of all existence. Not just this world, but all existence. And as we allow knowledge to reveal itself, remember the pages of the book will move from right to left, if you like, once our frequency is ready to receive the next state of knowledge. Once we've processed it, we've elevated our frequency, more knowledge will be exposed to us. And so the pages of that infinite book turn. I was shown and described a book a long time ago by a very, very gifted person. And it's a metaphor for knowledge. There's a book, infinite book of all knowing. It's knowledge and knowing. And as our ascent moves forward and our frequency moves towards the grace, closer and closer and closer, these pages turn, and the knowledge on those pages is revealed to us through energy, through the internal space, and we walk, as it says here, may walk in the line, may walk in the, well, he's talking about the path. So this is what this is talking about. The summary of knowledge is revealed to us by our Lord Jesus Christ. So it can be revealed to us by expressing and following the Christ consciousness message, the message of all the avatars, which need to be bonded together, because as a whole they create the whole message. There's not one message from one. Jesus isn't the only source of enlightenment we need to seek. We need to understand all the pieces of enlightenment from east, west, north, south. Don't stand on the single rock. As I've mentioned many times, there are many rocks across the river. We need to stand on them all and absorb the knowledge that each of them is giving us, because the totality of that is the movement towards grace. Okay, things are sure and necessary. We may walk in the first baptism is the forgiveness of sins. So the first baptism is effectively knowledge. The waters are describing you're dipping into the water because you are dipping into what's known as the water is knowledge, the water is life, the water is giving an act of showing that you are going through the water, the divine, the word, the Christ energy. Is the forgiveness of sins. What is sins? The sin is not our physical acts, as far as I'm concerned in these passages. This is talking about, for me, the sin of forgetting, the sin of attachment to material and detachment from the spiritual. In other words, moving to the left, staying there and remaining there and not moving towards the right. Moving towards material, not psychical or the spiritual, staying within the material. That is the sin is effectively letting go of God. Detaching from it, dismissing its mere existence is the sin. I baptize you, for the work of Jesus is, through it we are brought from people of the left, to the people of the right, to incorruptibility, being brought from the world, which is the material left, our exodus from the world into the eon, which is the right. Okay, and finally, on baptism, things of world to the sight of God, carnal to the spiritual. So this is listing the passages from left to right, or the physical, psychical, and spiritual. So things of the world to the sight of God. So moving from carnal to the spiritual, some physical to the angelic, which is a spiritual frequency. Remember, we don't get wings. This is a physical a frequency and experience that we move into. The closer we move towards grace, we move to eonic levels, which are frequency levels, from physical matter to more angelic grades of expansion, which are higher frequencies of knowing. You know, they're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 grades of frequency or dimensions. These are grades of ascent, in other words, of knowing. As we grow through those, more and more knowing emerges, and we become closer and aware, close to the reality of the divine grace itself. Creation to fullness, this is materialism to fullness, which means the all. World to the eon, which is physical to the frequency, energy, frequency. Enslavement to sonship. Enslavement means material enslavement, sonship being knowing that we are expressions and thoughts of God, of the divine. Entanglements to virtue, physical entanglements. Wayfaring to our home. Wayfaring means just travelling around, wandering. Cold to warmth. This is how we were brought from seminal bodies into perfect form. The cleansing, so the cleansing is the water. That's what the baptism is all about, is moving into water and cleansing oneself. But that is also just a metaphor, it's an act. It's symbolic. The journey itself, after you've had that cleansing, is for you to actually go into that spiritual journey and practice what it is that you're understanding. Is a symbol, absolutely. The gift of His Spirit is the word, so we need to practice the word and become that word. And the teaching, delivered us who are in Him. Souls will become perfect spirits. We have received the salvation of Christ, the Eucharist. Father, to knowledge, do your will. Glory be to you through your firstborn Son, Jesus Christ, now and forever. Amen. And that brings us to the end of that passage and the chapter. I hope you enjoyed that. It was quite interesting. Again, it was heavily broken up. And again, I just want to, this was something I was talking about at the end of the last video, which cut off, unfortunately. All through the Nag Hammadi text that we've gone through so far, we don't have that far to go. We're almost complete. It's referring and asking us to become the teachings. The teachings is for us to become the second coming and not to wait for something. This is a indoctrinated thought that is put into people. And I encourage anyone who listens to this, whether this resonates with you or not, is to understand that the only way to pass the ring, not pass, is to become that which the text here and others are asking you to become. Is to become that divine self and ascend through whatever grades you want to call them. We can split them up if that's what the mind wishes. Is to move towards God, move towards the Godhead, move towards the divine grace, the source itself. And that's the frequency. That is what the second coming is. It is us individually, is that second coming. It's the ascent. It's a passage of difficulty and challenge. It's not easy. Many people don't want to do that, so therefore they seek something else to come and save them. Because the passage is one's own passage, and it's a difficult one to accept because it requires us to persist, have faith, which is persistence, and knowing. It's a difficult one. We have to confront the image that we adorn in the mirror so much. This is why not many fulfill this passage. It is a difficult one to accept. And it can become the journey. Avoid just activities and spiritual acts when they look good. Go to church or pray just because you want something, or through bad times, and forget about it when things are good. The path is a lifetime thing. It's an absorption into it, and it must guide all your material actions, words, thoughts, and intentions too, within the material life that you create for yourselves. But you have to become it. There's no point just practicing. And again, this is the book that I wrote. I'm probably going to start another one after I finish the Nag Hammadi and start building something up. But this is the first one built wrote in 2019, if they're interested. And again, any suggestions for me to look at things, please let me know. There has been a suggestion for me to look at in the comments from the previous videos, and I will look at that when I finish when we finish the Nag Hammadi text. I will look at the thing that has been asked to look at and give a point of view on, and I will do so. So saying that, I'll just put the webcam back on and say thank you again for listening to this. I know it takes time, and some of it is a little bit scattered, so I tried to make it understandable and give my interpretation, of course, to everything, which is what these videos are for. But be well, be on the journey. It's a difficult one, but persist, because the grace waits for you to return to it, which is the whole point. So I want to say thank you again to everyone for listening, and God bless to you all.